No objections. Good afternoon. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive. I'm joined by members of our county executive team. I'll introduce all of them in a second, but we're here to talk about our first serious weather winter advisory that we're facing in Westchester County and elsewhere in the state. I think we can consider ourselves fairly lucky compared to our neighbors to the north that have been hit much harder by this system as it's come through. And we have not yet gotten the full force of the system ahead of us, so most of our preparations and planning are in anticipation of things that we expect will happen, but of course no one can predict the weather, so we'll keep an eye out for it. The governor has issued emergency status. It does not affect Westchester County. I believe the nearest counties affected are in Greene County and Columbia County further north of us in the Hudson Valley. But the team behind me is prepared to deal with what we expect is going to happen. Our predictions are that we're going to see snow accumulations of 2 to 4 inches, with the smaller amounts being south of 287, closer to New York City, the more populated urban centers of Westchester, and 4 inches in the northern part of Westchester County, which is closer in elevation to what we see in Putnam and Dutchess counties above us. This is a regional impact, northern New Jersey, Connecticut, most of southeastern New York. Different parts of the metropolitan area will be hit at different levels, and obviously we're focused on what we have to do here in Westchester County. This winter weather advisory will remain in effect until 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, and so our Emergency Operations Center, and John Cullen, who's here, he's the commissioner of our Emergency Services Department, and Dennis Del Borgo, who's with us here as well. They have opened that Emergency Operations Center at 5 o'clock this morning, and it will stay open through this period of time, and they will monitor and coordinate some of the communications between the different departments, not only of county government, but with our local partners. It's very important to understand at the outset what the county government is responsible for doing in Westchester County. And there's a host of very specific things. I'll cover them with you in general, and then we'll talk about what's happening in each of those areas. Westchester County runs the B-Line bus system, and it also runs, from a ground level standpoint, the Westchester County Airport. There are FAA traffic folks in the tower who will determine what happens to specific planes and traffic, but we run the ground operations in the airport and we run the bus system. We're responsible directly for the Bronx River Parkway. The other parkways are not owned by the county, and we are not required to plow them. We are required to plow the Bronx River Parkway. Our county public safety department, though, is responsible for the policing of all of those parkways. So the Hutchinson River Parkway, the Cross County Parkway, the Sawmill River Parkway, and then the ones that we own, the Bronx River Parkway, the much smaller Playland Parkway. All of that policing effort does fall within our Commissioner of Public Safety, the Commissioner Sheriff Tom Gleason, who's with us here today. We also have responsibility for those individuals who, through the program of social services, may need a shelter, an overnight shelter, and that is the responsibility of our Department of Social Services. We have the Commissioner, Kevin McGuire, here, and his first Deputy Commissioner, John Beefus, is with us, and we have shelters in Yonkers, Peekskill, Mount Vernon, New Rochelle, White Plains, and then a drop-in center in our Valhalla Grasslands campus. I should point out that in addition to the responsibility for the Bronx River Parkway, we also have responsibility for the Grasslands campus in Valhalla, which you know of as the location where the Westchester Medical Center is located. The Westchester County Jail is there. We have some other offices. Our fire and police academies are based out there, and labs and research and so forth. And we have the same responsibility for street treatment and plowing in that complex. It's a fairly sizable number of acres, as the local governments do in all the other streets and cities of Westchester County. It's important to note, as I'm advised, that plowing cannot begin until there's at least 3 inches of snow on the ground. So as we see snow settle but not stick, our plows are at the ready, but they cannot yet clear the roads. And what we're most concerned about in the timing of this snowstorm is when we hit that mark so that plowing can begin, and whether or not that happens right at the heart of our rush hour. If you may recall, last year, November 15th, we had a snowstorm that hit us in full force about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 3:30, right at the time that the evening rush hour was just beginning. There were some people who left, were given early release from their various places of work, and while they were out in the community, in the streets, it was impossible for the local plows to accommodate the clearing of the roadway. So we had a snarled traffic jam. People questioned, why didn't they know? Why didn't they plow? It wasn't a question of not knowing. It was a question of the amount of snow that fell when it was time to plow, the streets were clogged with rush hour traffic. That may happen again today. Now, there are a number of schools that have closed today, from as far south as Yonkers to as far north as Peekskill and North Salem. So there is a range of those schools which are out, and so all of those workers are not out on the roads. They hopefully are home. We've also had our major university and colleges close their operations today. That is that much less folks who are outside in the workforce as well. And so that hopefully will help us a little bit as we get to the rush hour situation. But the travel is going to be difficult and more treacherous as the evening goes on. The temperatures will follow the sun setting, and we expect that it's going to be very slick on all of our major roads, and people need to use normal precautions. We're in a snow climate. This is winter weather. It's come a little earlier than we expected, but we every year experience this, and all of the various precautions, which we'll touch on again, apply once again for all these different areas. In some of these different areas, we'll go through step at a time. First of all, in terms of our transportation services, the Beeline bus system is operating on normal weekday schedules as we speak now. There is no plans yet to change that. Bud Nicoletti, who's a Deputy Commissioner of Department of Public Works and Transportation, is monitoring the situation. If the roads become impassable in some of our steep slope routes, primarily along the western side of the county. If you know the topography of the county in the Hudson River Valley, you have steep slopes from Yonkers up to Peekskill, places like Ossining, Irvington, and so forth. Where we have routes that have to climb a street that is of a certain slope, the buses will not be able to negotiate that if enough snow falls, enough ice and slickness and so forth. So we adjust over to snow routes. We have not yet done that. That may yet happen, depending on the information that we get from out in the field. And of course, Bud Nicoletti is responsible for looking at that. But the Beeline bus system right now is operating close to schedule, and we expect it to stay that way through the course of the evening hours, but it'll be monitored. Obviously, our bus services lessen as we move into the nighttime hours. Certain routes continue on, certain routes end at various times of the day, and that's important. The airport will remain open by all expectations, but individuals should call their carriers if they're expecting to depart today, later today, or they're waiting for someone to arrive later today. They should call the carrier and find out if the flights are scheduled to arrive when they're set to arrive. Some may be diverted to other locations. That's a possibility. Those are decisions made by the air traffic controllers and by the airlines themselves. And then also the concerns that exist for people who are departing. Obviously, as we're speaking now in the early part of the afternoon, if you are planning to leave at 7 or 8 o'clock tonight on a flight out of Westchester County Airport, and you can negotiate an earlier departure, and there's space for you to do that, or there's an alternate place for you to use, that's a wise thing to do because the snow is going to get worse as we go over to the day. But we are looking at a total that should not exceed 4 inches. Now, anything can happen. But to the area north of us that has 12 inches and 18 inches, it's obviously a much bigger snow event than what we're experiencing here. But the roadways are slick in all different occasions. As we speak right now, we have a report roughly about a half an hour ago that the southbound lanes of the Sawmill River Parkway were closed at Route 133. There was a spin-out accident blocking both lanes. However, that accident is likely to be corrected perhaps already by now, if not in a short period of time. But Commissioner Sheriff Gleason and his team has extra patrols out there on all the different parkways, and one of their missions is to do exactly what this will be, is to take care of those incidents when they occur, and with the assistance of the TOWs and the local police as well, to try to keep those roads clear as much as possible. In terms of what's happening around us, Con Edison has a handful of outages reported at this moment in Harrison and Scarsdale. That's one of the things that our emergency services operation will be monitoring over in Hawthorne at the EOC. NYSEG has reported also a handful of outages, in each case less than 10, targeted in certain parts of the county because the snowfall is heavy in the northern part of the county, where there is sparse population, where there's also more exposed wires in a rural setting. We'll be very careful to monitor that if there's any widespread outage. If there's wires down, then we go through the routine as normally happens, which is it is the utility that has to come out and turn off the power. Then the local DPW is responsible for removing the downed tree or the downed telephone pole. with the power off, and then the power company sends a separate crew back out to reestablish the power. And if it's something that blocks one of the major roads, northern Westchester, you have parts of the county where there's one basic road that connects neighborhoods, these things can be a problem. That has not happened at this point. We're going to monitor that and then try to help coordinate response in each of those different areas. Our fire training center, which is on the Valhalla campus, will close at 4 o'clock today. We expect to have increased fire and EMS call volume, as you would expect as people become sitting in a disabled situation or lose power or have some other type of issue. All of those things will be responded to appropriately. Metro North is on or close, as we're reporting on all of our different lines. However, obviously we have not yet reached the evening rush hour. And if there are any trees that ultimately come down on a Metro North track, that could delay traffic. If there's any problems where we have the grade level crossings on the Harlem line of Metro North, that may be an issue. These are all things that have not happened, but we're anticipating it, and the various people behind me all have plans to move into action immediately if one of these things were to happen. But Metro North is operating on a close. We have no reported issues from Amtrak. There are 2 lines that are on the Hudson line and the New Haven line that Amtrak intercity traffic serves as well. We have, our DSS is responsible for working with local governments to make sure that everyone has a place to shelter on a night like tonight. We are in code blue. We have been for a while. Once the temperatures dip below a certain level, it's certainly cold out there. No one wants to be spending an evening outside in an unprotected environment. And as I said, that the DSS department under Commissioner McGuire and his team are monitoring that, and they work with local entities to make sure that anybody who is homeless will be covered in some fashion tonight. We have gotten a number of different driving trips from our friends in the Westchester County Police, all good advice. I'm going to make sure I do these things, and you should as well. This is important time for you to have good working tires on your car. Make sure that it gives you the proper traction that you can get, and if you're low on air, make sure that you fill the tires so that they can function the way they should. Windshield wipers have to be functioning in a certain way, otherwise you won't have the visibility. This is a perfect time, if you have the discretionary time, to pull into a service station and change your windshield wipers and make sure that's done. Fill up your gas tank. You never know if a power outage may hit in a certain way and make it impossible for you to get gas. You might be in a long line and you could run out of gas in the middle of a congested roadway. You don't want to do that. Make sure your phone is fully charged. This sounds like the things my father used to tell me, about the telephone thing. But most of these other things, Stan told George, and George didn't listen, and then he ran out of gas one day and didn't have all of these things. But now George is a grown man, and he understands it, and he's sharing his father's advice with all of you. Dress warmly. Have warm clothing in the car if you wind up in a situation where you run out of gas or you're stranded while you're waiting for the county police to come and save you. It can be pretty cold in a car that doesn't have heat. So make sure that you have the proper attire, boots for your feet to keep them dry, and everything else. And if you want to make sure that everything in your car is up to date, make sure you have a flashlight, have water in the car, have some reflective device that if you're disabled that you could put behind the car to identify other drivers that you've broken down, and a host of different things. And probably the smartest thing for all of us to do sitting here in the 1 o'clock hour is plan your travel schedule with additional time. If you know that there's going to be a slower, longer commute, that we're going into a period of time where the roads may be congested and there may be snow on the ground, leave extra time to accommodate the travel that you need to have so that you're not in a situation where you have to make up time by driving faster than you should, or if you wind up becoming disabled, you're in some situation picking up a child or picking up somebody else. All of these are good advice things that we think about the minute we see the first snowflakes come down, but we're at a point now, this is only the first snowfall of the season. This is the first day of December, and we can expect to see snow all through this month, January, February, March. The professionals behind me are prepared to deal with as many snowfalls as occur, and we as individuals have to be as prepared as well so that we can do the things that we have to do to the greatest opportunity. So with that, I don't know if I missed anything. Let me just look at my friends and fellow professionals. Tom?
The crash on the sawmill's been cleared. The roadway's reopened.
Okay, so the sawmill is reopened. The crash was taken care of. Thank you, Commissioner Sheriff Gleason. And that's probably the expectation you'll have. You will see spin-outs over the course of the next few hours. within a reasonable amount of time, they can be cleared, but no doubt there's a backup and a delay. And then also, I would also add, is driving, give proper distance between you and the car in front of you, because many times we drive on the expectation that the other guy won't have to make an emergency stop. And when that happens, you can get a multiple car crash, which are much harder for the police to clear. And so in this particular case, we're happy that that's cleared up. Have I missed anything of essential importance in any of that? Okay. I am joined, by the way, by our Deputy County Executive, Ken Jenkins, our Director of Operations, Joan McDonald, and also our County Attorney, John Nona, our Director of Communications, Catherine Chaffee, all of whom are going to be here for an extended period of time and available as we go later into the evening should there be any other issues. Any questions from our friends in the press? Yes?
Are there any particular issues between Lower Westchester County and Upper Westchester County that you'd like to identify? I know you said 2 to 4 inches, but any other differences in how you prepare for this area?
Well, I think we have to, and in what I said earlier, Northern Westchester has a very different road grid. In certain parts of the county, there's 1 or 2 roads that serve an area, where in Southern Westchester, you have a grid of alternative routes. If the Hutchinson River Parkway is backed up, you have the New England Thruway, you have the Boston Post Road. There are some other prominent roads that can skirt around it. If you're in Northern Westchester on Route 35, there aren't that many alternatives to that, and that is a factor. The distances in Northern Westchester are greater between point A to point B. You can run out of gas if you have to go 10 miles until you see a gas station. That may happen. And then also the power issues are more difficult for us in Northern Westchester because the lines are strung out over a larger, more rural environment. So generally, because of the altitude, if you will, slightly higher, slightly elevated in Northern Westchester, they usually get a little more snow than we do. The Sound shore of Westchester gets a little less snow because of the heat from the Long Island Sound, but they're in small margins. Right now, we're talking 2 to 4 inches. We're not talking at about a more significant number. The reports that we have now do not indicate that the direction of the path of the storm is going to change dramatically. That could always happen, but as it stands right now, the pattern of this particular storm is north of us, is not expected to dip down to us and create a dramatically different situation. But if that does happen, that's why our EOC is open, and they can immediately communicate with a variety of different players to change the game and to ramp up our response in those things.
Any idea about schools tomorrow?
Each school district makes their decisions. I suspect that schools that will close today will probably be closed tomorrow, because the expectation is if they close today and it's going to get worse tonight and tomorrow morning, tonight's commute will probably be the worst of it, but tomorrow morning, may not be a picnic. So I would suspect that if your school was closed today, there's a fairly good chance there'll be at least a delayed opening tomorrow, if not a closure. Again, a lot of it tracks the setting of the school and the community that it's in and how much snow it gets and so forth. But most of those school decisions are made, fairly close to the start of the school day. Some may make some decisions later this afternoon, but we'll see and we'll track. Other questions? Anything else that's of any interest? I know it's early in the process and you'll want updates later on. Catherine and her team will be available to communicate with her if we need to give you factual information, if you need any of us to be online, and that includes the folks behind me. Certainly each of them can be spokesperson on their particular area of responsibility if you're interested on any of these things. So feel free to reach out to us and we'll be happy to give you whatever information we know as quickly as we have it. And I know that some of our friends just got here, so if you want to do a separate stand-up, we'll be happy to do that for you. Okay? Any other questions? If not, as they say, in Hill Street Blues, be careful out there. Thank you. Thank you, folks.
Yep.
Thank you.